as this leads us straight into the topic of our first roundtable of the morning with Mrs. Elisabeth Tuerk, Director of the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Mrs. Tuerk will lead the discussion around the smart mix of measures of the UNECE Policy Recommendation 46, adopted last April at the plenary of UNECE. Mrs. Tuerk, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria Teresa. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished experts, dear guests, it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today, and I'm delighted to moderate this roundtable for around 45 minutes, where we are discussing the project Enhancing Traceability and Transparency for Sustainable Value Chains in Garment and Footwear. That's the project jointly implemented by UNECE and ITC, the International Trade Center, with support of the European Union. And it was very exciting for me to hear just before our representatives from the European Commission who referred to us as a trailblazer project. And I think that that's really what it is. Now, as highlighted by Ms. Olga Algayerova, UNECE's Executive Secretary, the clothing sector is really fundamental for promoting circularity and sustainability. It's economically significant, the value chains crisscross the planet, and it has huge environmental and social implications. Now, today we are discussing how transparency and traceability can be key enablers towards a more responsible, a more carbon neutral, and a more resilient industry. And at UNECE, we are really very proud of the normative framework that has been recently adopted by UNECE membership, particularly in April at the so-called UN-CFACT plenary. And that's this UN-brokered solution that has been referred to by speakers before. So we hope that as UNECE, we can make our contribution, that the industry and the related actors, that they have the tools at hand to create change and to move us towards more resilient and more sustainable fashion industry. For the panel here this morning, we are building particularly on recommendation 46. That's the recommendation on enhancing traceability and transparency of sustainable value chains in the garment and footwear sector. And our panelists will discuss from their different perspectives the 5 areas that are in this UNECE normative instrument. That is, first of all, policy actions, norms, and standards. Secondly, incentives. Thirdly, innovation and research and development. Fourth, awareness and education. And fifth, multi-stakeholder collaborative initiatives. And I'm very excited that we have a very diverse panel here with us. We will hear from public and private sector. We will hear from North and South. We will hear from civil society and the media. And for each of our speakers here this morning, I invite you to share your views on the measures that can lead to the practical implication of these UNECE policy recommendation. So we have with us here today from the government side, from the government of France, the Ministry of Economics and Finance, Ms. Maylis Souque. Maylis Souque is the Secretary General to the National Contact Point to the OECD and advisor for responsible business conduct of France. We have with us from the Intergovernmental side, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, Mr. Escipión Oliveira Gómez, who is the Assistant Secretary General of the Department of Structural Economic Transformation and Trade. We have with us from the private sector side, from the Kering Group, Ms. Chiara Morelli, who is the Group Operations Sustainability Manager. And we have with us from the civil society side, the Clean Clothes Campaign, Mr. Paul Roeland, who is the Transparency Lead. And we have with us from the media side, from Vogue Italia, Ms. Sara Sozzani Maino, who is the Deputy Editor-in-Chief and Head of Vogue's Talents International. We'll be joined online by our last speaker, again from the government representative from the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. And we are delighted to welcome Ms. Maria Benedetta Francesconi, who is the head of Division 6, Directorate General for Industrial Policy, Innovation and SMEs. So I think that's really very diverse and will allow us to hear very different perspectives on how UNECE policy recommendation can be implemented and what are particular lessons learned. Without further ado, I would like to start with one of our government representatives from France, Ms. Maylis Souque from the French Ministry of Economics and Finance. And Maylis, you have been with us throughout the project, and from you it will be really interesting to hear a little bit the policy dimension and to see how the UNECE policy recommendation can be linked to the European legal framework, to the national legal framework. So with this, Maylis, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today in this very important conference where we are all targeting to accelerate change and in the garment, global supply chain and industry. I would like also to thank Italy for the presidency under the G20, where it is also moving forward on circular economy for the garment and footwear sector, and it is something that is really important. Now back to the French level, if I may say. In fact, we have several initiatives and laws that were adopted before or during UNECE project was being prepared. And I would like to say what we can do as a national contact point, what we can do to support the change, and also at national level. The National Contact Point, it's a body that is put in place by the governments that adhere to the OECD guidelines on responsible business conduct. And each government has to set up an NCP with two missions. One is to promote responsible business conduct, so we do promotion. And RBC is, of course, about traceability, transparency in supply chains. Now, at the French NCP level, why garments matter? Because after Rana Plaza catastrophe, the Ministry of Trade requested the French NCP to explain what happened and to describe how to implement due diligence in the sector. So we issued a report that was about identifying risk in global supply chain in the garment industry, and where transparency and traceability was already there. And then we pushed forward this work at the OECD to adopt a guide on RBC in the garment sector, and we worked also closely with UNECE to elaborate the policy recommendation. This brings me at the French level, where we have several laws I am happy to describe very quickly, where you can see that transparency and traceability are important. Is it still working? Okay, I go along. First, we have the due vigilance law that was adopted in 2017. That is about the obligation of due diligence for large companies, where they have to identify risk through their supply chains. And to identify your supply chains, you have to do the traceability of your supply chain, and you need also transparency. And this law is already applying in France to very large companies having huge supply chains. We also adopted a law on reducing waste and circular economy in February 2020 that has several measures that are aligned with the UNECE policy recommendation, and which are about reducing waste by prohibiting the destruction of unsold gold, also in the garment industry. It is about an obligation to producers and importers of products to disclose quality and characteristic on environmental aspect of the products. It covers also the garment industry. It is also about environmental or social and environmental label of products that will have to be in place by sectors, beginning with the garment industry. We also have the state as an economic actor, where public procurement of garments need now to have 20% of recycled fiber. So we have a package of measures. We also have private sector that is mobilized. I could mention the strategic framework for the luxury and fashion industry. We also have the ICS initiative that will speak this afternoon, that is mobilizing its brands to disclose their factories through the ITC project. And of course, we support the EU action on circular economy, on due diligence. Although the project has been slightly delayed, we are expecting ambitious action from the EU on this aspect. And also, I may remind what was said by the Commission, the EU guidance that was adopted in July and made public to fight against forced labor in the global chains. And we know that this may also concern the garment industry. So the tools the UNECE adopted are very useful for the governments who still doesn't have the package we have. And I think that when we have the legislation already adopted, they are useful to prepare decrees and application texts that we need to make the policy ambitious, real for the private sector and for the consumers. I will stop there. Thank you, Elisabeth.
Thank you very much, Maylis, for sharing your work as an OECD national contact point, and for the positive words also about the UNECE framework and how this can practically be used in a country like yours, and hopefully also in many other countries to come. Now, having heard from a government representative of a European Union member state, let us turn to the producing countries. Let us turn to the South. We know that in global value chains, in the textile sector, they crisscross the planet, and it's very important to look at those places where garment and footwear is also the inputs are being sourced. With this, I'd love to give the floor to Mr. Escipión Oliveira Gómez, Assistant Secretary General of the Department of Structural, Economic Transformation and Trade at the ACP Secretariat, that's the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states. And very much looking forward to hearing what the UNECE recommendation can be, how it can be implemented in practical terms in the producing countries. Escipión, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. For me, it's an honor to be here today with our partners from the European Union. I wanted to thank Mr. Sorensen for his words of support. Also to the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Mrs. Algarellova, Mrs. Pisani-Argentin, and Mrs. Tuerk, and also to the School of SDA Bocconi. It's great to be here today. For those that do not know us, as you rightly said, we are the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. We were created, or we became an international organization last year, but we were created in 1975 through the Georgetown Agreement, and we regrouped 79 countries from Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific, me, myself, being from the Caribbean. And we promote sustainable development of our member states and the gradual integration of our countries into the world economy. Our ultimate objective is to reduce and eventually eradicate poverty. And in our actions, youth and women empowerment are at the center of everything we do. We are led by His Excellency, Mr. George Ivelo Pinto Chicote from Angola. And we are very much committed to the sustainability agenda and to the promotion of the Sustainable Development Goals. Having said this, I wanted to commend UNECE for its policy recommendation number 46. We find it very pertinent. We support the strong call made in this document that the new rules governing the international trade be developed jointly by all stakeholders. We also support the importance that the document has given to SMEs, but I would like to add micro companies as well, because a lot of the SMEs in Europe that are considered to be SMEs for us, a lot of our SMEs are micro in Europe. We are also very happy to see how the document tries to deal with vulnerable groups and calls for the integration of developing countries in the establishment of rules. However, the realities on the ground in our countries are tough. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I say that somebody that has never taken a shower with a little can and just putting it over his hair is not a Dominican person, because we have all lived blackouts, periods without water. Hurricanes is a day-to-day or yearly basis for us. So the challenges that we have on the ground, lack of electricity in many parts of the countries, even people not knowing how to read and write, it is common in our countries. In fact, that is a burden that we have. Given that the traceability system are very costly, we have the document talks about a lot of interesting things, blockchain, accessibility to computers, and et cetera. And we think it's very good, but we have to work a way to allow our countries to be able to be part of the system, and that the system does not become insurmountable barriers to trade, that they do not become really non-tariff barriers or technical barriers to trade, which is really our main importance for us. If this happens, we will widen the gap between the haves and have-nots. And I'm here, in a way, even if I come from a good background in my own country, I'm here to speak for those that don't have a voice, even in my own country and region. We looked at the document very well, and we liked it a lot. We believe that special attention should be given to guaranteeing sufficient time. In Europe, when you do a legislation, maybe a year or two is a long time. For us, it's a very, very short period to implement. We also believe that appropriate technical and financial assistance, this is the part of incentives that is mentioned in the document. The document poses the problem, but doesn't really give a solution on how to work around it. And we do know that, we are working with the European Union, with the United Nations, also with ITC, in enhancing our country's competitiveness, but there's still a way to go. We would like to make a call here to take into consideration the exporters in our countries and to favor the carrot approach rather than the stick approach. That way, even if maybe voluntarily is insufficient, mandatory is too much for us, at least at this stage. So we propose to work together, developing the rules, developing the incentives to make the world really a better place. We are really committed, like I said, to the sustainability agenda, but we cannot say that today is a level playing field. It's not. We welcome the component support that we receive from the European Union, and we're eager to collaborate with all of you here today. Having said this, we are really open for discussions and see how we can really ensure a better livelihoods for everybody, especially the producers. Something that we are really promoting is a decent income for farmers, something very important, that the people that actually produce the raw materials have a decent living. It is their right. Sometimes eating every day, going to school seems to be a luxury in our countries, and we want to make it a reality. Having said that, I wanted to say, gracias mille. Thank you, gracias, merci, obrigado, thank you, shukran, yarejov, asante, anvinak.
Thank you very much, Escipión, for not only recognizing the UNECE work in terms of its contribution to international trade governance, but really for giving us that reality check in terms of what needs to be done to bring the poor and the vulnerable and the producing countries on board. And I think you very well referred to the cost of complying with and implementing traceability systems, and the importance of ensuring that this doesn't become a barrier to accessing market, a barrier to trade. So we will look forward to working with you to see how we can strengthen that technical assistance and that support component in the work. And that's very important also for UNECE, because in our membership amongst our 56 member states, we do have several with economies in transition, notably in Central Asia, Southern Caucasus, and also the Western Balkans and in the eastern part of Europe. So these considerations very much apply there as well. Now, having heard from the public sector, let us turn to the private sector. And here, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Ms. Chiara Morelli from the Kering Group, a group with many important and well-recognized brands. And Chiara, you're the Group Operational Sustainability Manager. And I'm very curious to hear from you about your perspectives of the practical implementation of the UNECE package. I understand you've been contributing also to the blockchain pilots in the leather and footwear sector. So with that, Chiara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody, and thank you for having me here. I'm very pleased, and actually I have a lot of fun working this growing group. So when we see what is today here, this really professional environment and all the very high-level speakers, so we made a lot of journey together. So to answer the question of this panel, what is needed from our perspective? So we think that for sure, as it grew together in a collaborative way, the implementation should be also a collaboration. We see that as an industry, we have for sure a role to play. Maybe it's not just one role. We have to be advisor. We have to be the example of doing the things, and we have also to push. So we are between the supply chains and the consumers. So we are in a sort of sandwich position, but we feel actually good in that, and we are happy to take our responsibility. Another big push should come for sure from the civil society. So we need to make consumers aware of what is really a pledge of sustainability. We see a lot, and it was also mentioned by my colleague from Patagonia, there is a lot of greenwashing. This way, the UN has done a big, great job in bringing together all the different things and providing tools for really measuring along the supply chain, backwards or upstream in the supply chains, measuring the environmental impact, the social impact of the production. And this should be, for sure, one of the direction we should go. So consumers should be able to read the pledge and to make responsible choices based on science and on verified data. So the president of Eurotex said that we are working with data, exchanging data, and this is exactly what we are doing as well in Kering. Ideally, governments should adopt that, because we are still in a situation where we have a lot of certifications and many ways of describing things. But for sure, there is the need to make it real. And we believed in this project since the beginning, because it's in a way something that we are living in our companies. So we see that transparency and traceability has been always the means for us to describe our products. It's not just for the sake of it, but we want to have traceable products, and we have committed to that publicly, because we want to demonstrate that we are doing things in the proper way. It is for us also an opportunity to work in the pilots, as Elisabeth said, because it's again, it's a way of making things real on the ground. So we are reaching out backwards in the farthest actors of our supply chains. We are working with them on the same level, and it's also an opportunity for inclusion. So we are bringing back where we source raw materials, so a sort of technology, incentives, a way of making those supply chains visible, and an opportunity for them to show that many of them are working in a good way. So for that, it's again, it's a challenge for sure, because we still live in the situation that some data are confidential, that the technology is not everywhere, but we think that we have to train, to make errors, and here there is a community of people that has the knowledge of adapting and adjusting everything that we will do in the proof of concept to have at the end the right pledge. We are actually lucky because with the environmental profit and loss, so with this natural capital accounting, we were more or less prepared to have the data. So, and this was one of the first activities when I joined the Kering group to work on the environmental profit and loss, and that we could measure a lot in our supply chain, and we could also change a lot through programs and so on. And we hope that this one will help us to go the next step, the next big challenge of blockchain. That is, it was many years ago just a name. Now here it's becoming a reality and something that we can touch. I thank you very much, and I thank Maria Teresa and the team, who is really the big pusher of these pilots. Thank you.
Many thanks, Chiara. And I think very interesting how you refer to the different actors, sort of like the industry having to play a role, the need for a push from civil society, and also the importance of government recognition. And you also flagged the great relevance and importance of data. That's where traceability and also new technologies can come in. And once again, thank you for supporting us. And I understand in the Kering group, you're also really supporting the upstream part of the value chain. So I think that's a very interesting and applaudable approach. Having heard from industry, let us now turn to civil society. And let us turn to another key player, the Clean Clothes campaign. And I'm very happy to have with us here Mr. Paul Roeland, who is the transparency lead. And I understand, Paul, you're really looking into what can be done for the vulnerable, for the workers. And with that, curious to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I want to start by emphasizing again that clothes are made by people, as was said before. The majority of those are women. The majority of those are women of color in the South. Those are the ones that we are unapologetically on their side, and they should also be included in these discussions. As we have seen in the past decades, you need workers' input to achieve true impact. We've seen that in the Bangladesh Accord for Safety, now the International Accord. We've seen it also on a smaller scale, for instance, in the Lesotho Agreement on gender-based violence. The input of workers is crucial in monitoring, in making sure that these kinds of changes actually have an impact. And impact is what we should be aiming for, because true due diligence is not a process. It's not the thing you do once and you do check, 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 and you're done. True due diligence is a continuous process that keeps going. It's not a snapshot in time. So what you should be doing, what we all should be doing, also in regards to traceability and transparency, is measure impact, not policy. And that means we have to change the KPIs. We need to aim to actually find issues. Quite often, the measurements now are aimed at finding 0 issues. We have a clean bill of health. Our supply chain is great. That's the wrong question. You're asking the wrong questions. You should be glad when you find issues, because you can't fix what you don't find. If you're actually aiming to find 0 issues, you're not finding the real problems. You should be finding issues and then solving them, and that should be your measure. You should be saying, this year, this many issues reached us. We managed to solve X% of those in a satisfactory way, and we agreed to do some root cause analysis to make sure that lesser of these issues appear in future. Those are KPIs that we should be aiming for. Aiming for no issues. We all know the state of our industry and the supply chains. If you have no issues, you're not looking hard enough. And you should be looking harder, and traceability and transparency will help us to do that. Also, there has been a lot of talk today and will be in the next few days on circularity and on the ecological side of things. Also here, I want to stress that this circularity will also be done by people. If you're going to have organic cotton made with slave labor, that's not sustainable. If you're going to have circular, recycled polyester that was smelted by poor women and girls in Bangladesh in a toxic fume, that is not sustainable. We are creating a new industry, this circular one, so now we have an opportunity to, right from the start, also in the circular part of it, see exactly who is doing that recycling, under what circumstances, whether they are kept safe, and whether their rights are guaranteed. And lastly, I'll keep it short. We all know laws are coming. The CSR directive is coming. Ursula von der Leyen, as was mentioned before, has made a strong statement against forced labor. There will be laws coming. We all know this. These laws will mean that we will get lots of data from traceability and transparency, not only from the garment sector, from other sectors as well. And that's why I'm actually happy with this UNECE initiative, because it standardizes, and it means also that we can start also comparing data to adjacent sectors. Toys, electronics. With smart clothes, electronics and garments are mixing more and more anyway. We can't say we're only going to be garments anymore. There are many companies that produce multiple types of products. So standardization is the key, and for that we need a global body like the UN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and you really were thought-provoking, and in terms of asking us to look at the impact. Yeah, it's not only about measuring policy, but it's about measuring impact, and very interesting also in terms of we need to look harder where the issues are and finding ways to solve them. So I understand this very much a call to action for all of us. Also interesting, your point at the end where you said like going to different sectors, and when we look at circular economy, which is a key new topic for UNECE, to not forget the human and the workers dimension there, and to really see what that means as we are creating that sort of like new industry and on the circular economy. So many thanks, Paul, for that. Now, having heard from civil society and the campaign groups, let us turn to communication and the media, also very important in the fashion and textile sector. And I'm delighted to have with us another key player, I would say, Vogue International. And my pleasure to invite Sara Sozzani Maino, who is the Deputy Editor-in-Chief and the head of Vogue Talent International, to talk a little bit to us about the key challenges and priorities you see for the industry and how the UNECE toolkit and recommendation can come in here. The floor is yours.
Thank you everyone for having me. I think today we are discussing a very important matter, and all what's happening now in the world is fundamental for a change, and media plays this fundamental role of creating awareness, because we're talking about how the fashion industry is polluting the world and the overproduction, but I think that the fundamental part is media, by creating awareness and saying really what's happening, because I do think that big industry are making the change, but the outside, it's not really still aware of what really is happening and what really can change. So I think that the role of media, such as Vogue or any kind of media, has the responsibility to create this awareness and a simple language to make understand future consumers what can be the real change and how can it be done. Because from media part, I see a lot of not awareness from common people. I say common people, people which are not really do not know, what's happening and really are keen to know what's happening. So I do think that the language is fundamental. We usually say responsibility and not sustainability, because maybe it's not in the real world, but in fashion now the word, sustainability has lost a little bit its meaning due to the fact of overusing it. And we were talking also about greenwashing, which is obviously a very, very common happening. And also there's not so much awareness of what's happening. So we talk about responsibility because it's community responsibility, it's responsibility towards the planet, it's responsibility towards everyone. So the language is fundamental, and a clear language makes understand what's happening. So I do think that today, what we are talking today and the future concepts that are going to be talking about, it's fundamental, the language, because we are used to speak in this way, but people from the outside are not used to it. So I see it also with designers. We work with the whole new generation of creatives, which are our future. So we need to support them and we need to give them visibility because they are our voice, they are the future, and they are the people that can make the change. So I always try to emphasize the use of language because the simple, which doesn't mean to take away the importance of words, it's the best way to arrive to people. We are talking about consumption over production. People need to know what they're buying, and they need to think about that once they go into a shop and they're buying something, they're responsible of their choice. But they also need to be conscious about asking who made that clothes, what's happening, what's behind it. And without knowing that all the processes that we are talking about today are really happening, people will never know. So it's kind of a circular economy, language, media, and awareness. So, I mean, this is what media is important and is fundamental. Today, there are many important people. I feel myself sometimes not, enough conscious about what's happening, but I think we have the power of communicating, and this is the most efficient way to arrive to people. But I always really underline the importance of the language and direct speaking, because we in this room, we know what we're talking about, but outside it's very difficult to perceive and understand what's happening. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sara, and great to hear from you about the importance of awareness for creating change and obviously the role of media in that regard. And I was particularly fascinated how you disentangled a little bit the different terms, sustainability, circularity, responsibility, and what it means, and in the context of greenwashing, and maybe that's also an invitation to look at our UN language and terminology from that perspective. So many thanks for being with us and reminding us of the importance of looking at the youth and the future as well. Having done a wonderful tour de table of guests here in the room, let us now turn to the screen and to our virtual contribution, and also to our host, the representative from the Italian government. It's my great pleasure to invite Maria Benedetta Francesconi, who is head of Division 6, Directorate General for Industrial Policy, Innovation, and SMEs in the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. And Maria Benedetta, we are very happy to have you. As we heard before, Italy is playing a key role also in the context of the G20 presidency, and very curious to hear from you also in terms of concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. And good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the UNECE and the Bocconi School of Management for this invitation. A particular thanks to Maria Teresa for her passion in dealing with this project, and the project that we followed as Italian Ministry of Economic Development since the beginning, and we are very happy with the results so far. I'm here to briefly report on the G20 Digital Economy Task Force work that I had the honor to co-chair during the 2021 Italian presidency. We worked towards the ministerial declaration, which was approved by digital economy ministers in Trieste on the 5th of August. And the focus of the declaration is how to leverage digitalization for a resilient, strong, and sustainable inclusive recovery. In this context, one of the priorities undersigned by ministers is consumers' awareness and protection. And Italy, in the presidency, put particularly attention on distributed ledger technologies, such as blockchain, as an enabler for traceability in global value chains of consumer goods. Indeed, in the process, we organized many activities, such as a multi-stakeholder forum, in order to gather experiences among actors and governments. And we also worked with the OECD to elaborate a report collecting practices on blockchain in global value chains in G20 countries. First, we have to say that this technology presents interest areas of application due to the complexity of the global value chains, but still we are in an early stage of application and development by firms and also by governments. In collecting examples, we referred to a case study Italy realized in 2019, especially the Ministry of Economic Development, where I work on blockchain for the textile and garment sector, which was also considered by the UNECE project, but especially we referenced also the sustainability pledge and the UNECE project as an example for G20 countries to develop their policies and instruments for traceability in global value chains. Indeed, we know that blockchain presents advantages thanks to the fact that it can ensure information and data and improve transparency towards consumers. It was mentioned many times today. But we also saw many difficulties among SMEs, especially, and among companies in the application of this technology of blockchain, but also in traceability of global value chains. Maybe you already know these problems, but just to mention them, there is a need to, to trace information which is not so available for SMEs that suffer for information asymmetries along the supply chain, especially if you go far up to the supply chain. And then there is a need of input control of information to assure accuracy of the data and information, and you also need certification of data. Moreover, there is an issue that was mentioned many times on awareness and skills, and also on availability of technologies that can be combined with blockchain, such as Internet of Things, in order to make the information more reliable and also to communicate with consumers. And last but not least, and this was mentioned also today, the lack of interoperability among different protocols, different blockchain infrastructures, but also different standards for traceability. So policy issues to be tackled by G20, just to recap, are to create, first of all, a suitable legal framework for the development of the technology and its application, including its use across borders, to spread culture and improve the knowledge on global value chains through education, competence, and skills, especially for traceability and the use of technology, and especially for SMEs. To promote technical standards and interoperability systems for the technology open source, and also for traceability, as it was mentioned today. And last but not least, I just want to stress that there is a need to promote ecosystems for companies and multi-stakeholder collaborative initiatives. Some of them were mentioned today. It was recalled the Bangladesh agreement, but but also we need more cooperation among companies along the supply chain in order to overcome the limits of bargaining powers of certain companies towards larger ones, but also we need more cooperation among stakeholders and with governments as well. So to conclude, Italy has taken a leading role in exploring how digital technologies can give consumers reliable information on the life of products and help producers, particularly SMEs, increase the sustainability in their processes all over the G20 presidency. We welcome the findings of the Sustainability Pledge, and we promote such initiatives also in the future. And we are eager to know the development of the projects and to see how it can help both governments and industry for a real sustainability of global value chains. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Maria Benedetta, and congratulations also for the leading role that Italy is playing in terms of leveraging the power of digitalization, and which clearly is important for a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable recovery. I very much enjoyed, Maria Benedetta, how you looked at the pros and the cons, the benefits and the challenges, and you mentioned several challenges in terms for the SMEs, for the awareness raising. You mentioned challenges related to data, the input of data, the certification, and last but not least, very important, the challenges relating to interoperability. And I think that will bring us to the concrete technical aspects we're going to discuss here in the coming days. With this, I'd like to thank all the speakers for their wonderful and very enriching remarks. And it's been a great discussion, and I'd like to maybe draw a few very brief concluding remarks from this. And I would say, first of all, it's clear that there is a recognition of the huge challenges, the sustainability, circularity challenges related to the fashion, clothing, and textile sector. And it's clear that the change is needed. Secondly, we've discussed the importance of impact. And if we want to be impact-driven, what do we need? We need to coordinate, even at the global level, our actions and between the different actors. And we need to scale up the solutions. So if we want to achieve impact, it's about coordination and scaling up. And I think here, traceability, transparency, and the power of technologies have been mentioned as one of the key elements coming in. Now that needs to happen at different levels, and these are identified also in the UNECE recommendation. The policy level with policy coherence and the right set of incentives. At the standards level with the minimum criteria, the KPIs, and the common language in the value chains. And at the technology level when it comes to the digital transformation. I particularly enjoyed that we did look a lot at the issue of inclusiveness. And inclusiveness, that's for the SMEs, for the MSMEs, as we've heard from Escipión. And that's also for the countries that are not developed countries, but that are developing countries or countries with economies in transition, which is very important for UNECE, particularly for our membership in Central Asia, the Southern Caucasus, and the eastern parts of Europe. We've also looked a lot at the importance of awareness raising and communication. And I've been very happy to see that this really is something where maybe also UNECE will be focusing its energies on in the future. Now, in UNECE, we are very proud of the package that has been adopted in spring this year, the UN brokered solution, as it was referred to earlier today. And in our coming month, we'll focus the energies on fostering the uptake of the tools, so rolling them out, increasing outreach and communication, and clearly also increasing capacity building and supporting those stakeholders and countries where discussions like the ones we are having here today are maybe not yet common and still at an emerging stage. So with this, I'd like to thank all the speakers. I'd like to thank the team, Maria Teresa and the team, for the amazing work, and all the partners. And I'd also like to thank Bocconi SDA for hosting us here today. It's clear that we are all pursuing a joint objective, namely to accelerate the transformation of the industry. And it's wonderful to see how we can join hands in this regard. And it's been a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. Thank you.
Elisabeth, thank you to all panelists for a very rich and inspiring discussions and sharing your views and perspectives and recommendations. So, coffee break, coffee time. So a few practical remarks for participants that are here in presence with us. Coffee will be served at Bar La Centrale in the building, so please follow the welcome team just at the entrance of the room. And for participants that have joined us with online, we have more than 150 today. Have your coffee break. We resume at 11:30 sharp with Francesca Romana Rinaldi for the next roundtable, the monitor for circular fashion, the KPIs, the commitments to the sustainability pledge from the companies of the monitor for circular fashion. Just a quick note, complete program available on the event platform, and please do use the chat for questions, for comments, and for sharing views and materials with the participants. Thank you all.